Having said that, we have a special guest this morning. We have a state elected official he's going to come make some statements. Attorney General Jeff Landry. Mr. Landry, if you'd come forward, please. We're not here to clap. He's here to speak.
Yeah.
We all understand you're here. You probably appreciate what he's doing, as we all do. Attorney General, if you would state your name and thing for the mic and your guest, please.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, distinguished members of this committee, fellow colleagues, concerned parents, citizens, I'm Jeff Landry, the Attorney General for the state of Louisiana. To the right of me is a distinguished Bobby Kennedy Jr. Many of y'all may know the great iconic family he represents. I brought him with me to just add a couple of words. I think that, first of all, I'd like to thank the Speaker for being here today, and I think that his comments basically echo the gravity of the situation that is at hand. I appreciate him laying down the foundation for where this committee is charged with going. And to add just a little bit of meat to what Mr. Murray explained, as the state's chief legal officer, it's my obligation to ensure that agencies' actions comply with the law and the Constitution. And with that in mind, I'm advising you that the proposed LDH plan to promulgate adding COVID-19 vaccine to the list of required immunizations for school entry is not permitted under state law. Across the country, as the Speaker mentioned, no state legislature has passed a law requiring COVID-19 vaccines for children. And if this rule is adopted, Louisiana will join California as the only state to mandate vaccines for school children. Of course, Louisiana's law goes even further because it requires the vaccination of both primary and elementary school children, where California's rule only extends to middle school and high school. Over the last several days, I've been contacted by a number of legislators who have raised concerns over the actions of the Department of Health. I'm asking you to take back the police powers of this state. We cannot allow an executive branch to bypass the constitutional responsibilities of this legislature by allowing them to create policy and law using executive fiat. That is absolutely the job that you are charged with doing. Our office has researched the requirements set forth in statute that govern the oversight of this committee. The oversight is tasked with making 4 determinations today. And when the time comes, I ask that this committee address each one of those 4 items. Number 1, the proposed rule is not in conformity with the intent and scope of the enabling legislation purporting to authorize its adoption. Let me explain. This rule does not conform with the intent and scope of the enabling legislation because it is contrary to revised statute 1770. Under 17170, because it imposes the requirement of evidence of immunity on all students, not just those identified by law. The law only requires evidence of immunity on 2 groups of people currently. Each person entering any school system in the state for the first time, or each person entering the 6th grade. However, the proposed rule attempts to impose evidence of immunity on each and every student attending school in the state. This section states that each individual attending a school within the state in person shall present such school satisfactory evidence as having received vaccinations in accordance with the dosing schedule, including any booster dosing. Additionally, the proposed rule requires schools to prohibit students from in-person learning if the student is not vaccinated for COVID-19. That goes to to what the speaker was talking about earlier. LDH does not have the authority to exclude students from in-person learning. Even under the rule, if there is an outbreak of a vaccine preventable disease, only the school has the authority to exclude students from attendance, not the Louisiana Department of Health. They may make a recommendation to the school, but it is the administrators and the faculty who are empowered to make the final decision regarding unimmunized students.
Guys, can y'all listen back there? We're trying to listen to this man. Yes, sir.
And I would caution against preventing students. I would also just add to the legislature's note that I would caution against preventing students from attending in-person learning, as this may violate the legislature's obligation for an education of our student in our state. With regard to written dissent, I have heard some people say that parents can just opt out. Although generally 170 allows a student to present written dissent and enter the school without compliance of an immunization schedule, there is an exception for recipients of public assistance who receive less protection. Let me read that again. If there is a student that is on Medicaid or public assistance, we are thereby disproportionately disadvantaging them, because under Louisiana Revised Statute 46-231-4, any child receiving Medicaid or FITAP would not be eligible for written dissent, but would instead have to submit a written statement from a physician that the immunization procedure is contradicted for medical reasons, or that the parent objects to procedure on religious grounds. So we're now going to disadvantage the most disadvantaged. Failure to comply with the public assistance vaccination within a reasonable time could result in the suspension of the public assistance. So again, those minorities who may be on public assistance or anyone else is at a now disadvantage, because we're giving those who are not on public assistance a greater right than those on public assistance. A large percentage of children in Louisiana receive Medicaid and will be subject to more stringent requirement. So the state would be treating those families differently than those not receiving public assistance. Number two, the proposed rule does not conform to all applicable provisions of the law in our Constitution. It does not allow satisfactory evidence of immunity to be furnished in lieu of immunization. And this is important because this body specifically in the statute wrote into the statute that a person may present satisfactory evidence of immunity to or immunization against vaccine preventable disease. This rule does not allow the students to furnish satisfactory evidence of immunity in lieu of immunization. Under the proposed rule, the student previously infected with COVID-19 who develops antibodies may still be excluded from attendance. Simply put, the proposed rule eliminates satisfactory evidence of immunity and is contrary to the law and its intent. Number three, this proposed rule has no merit and is ill-advised. It makes policy and mandates vaccines powers that are reserved to each and every one of you in this body. And further, the fiscal impact to the state is completely unknown. The mRNA injection is substantially different from conventional vaccines and is not authorized under the current statute. There is no dispute that mRNA injection is a new type of vaccine that is different from conventional vaccines. According to the fixed meaning of canon statute, construction of words must be given by their meaning when the text was adopted. When the language of the law is susceptible to a different meaning, it must be interpreted as having that meaning. This means that the new mRNA technology was not approved by the FDA for use as a vaccine at the time this legislature wrote the statute. The word vaccine has only in the past few months been understood to encompass mRNA. The proposed rule then broadens the statute to include technology that was not intended or debated in this body. And additionally, when we look at the diseases listed in 17170, we can see firsthand the type of vaccines which this body placed in the statute. And they gave a standard, and that standard is important. It says vaccine preventable diseases. And it includes in the statute a list of those vaccine preventable diseases such as measles, mumps, rubella, whooping cough, etc. These diseases have one thing in common. They are diseases that are highly effective, where highly effective vaccines have demonstrated the ability to eradicate or prevent the disease. As such, these are truly vaccine preventable disease compared to diseases like the common flu or COVID-19. What you see is LDH has two lists. It's a required list, which are the vaccine preventable diseases, and a recommended list. And why? Because when you list out the viruses I just spoke about that have vaccines, the efficacy of those vaccines are anywhere between 85 to 99%. The flu does not have that. Therefore, LDH recommends the shot, but cannot mandate the shot. Finally, number 4, the committee should determine that the proposed rule is unacceptable to the Oversight Committee. The legislative power of this state is vested with you all. The Louisiana Constitution provides for a separation of powers amongst 3 branches of government and provides that none of these shall exercise the power belonging to the other. Although the legislature, in exercising its constitutional vested power, may delegate your responsibility to an agency, it must have the ability to claw that power back when need. It is a complete check on the system. For these reasons, I am asking you to please stop this rule, to please address all 4 issues that you are charged with. And what's more, for just one moment, I would encourage you to closely listen to the man seated next to me, someone who came down from Louisiana to share his insights with you. Among many things, Mr. Bobby Kennedy Jr. is an attorney and a humanitarian. He is the founder of the chairman of Children's Health Defense, a nonprofit organization whose mission is to end childhood health epidemics by working aggressively to eliminate harmful exposures. It's no secret that I'm a Republican and Mr. Kennedy's family are Democrats. This distinction should be no further proof that this critical issue before you today is not a red one or a blue one. It's not a conservative one. It's not a liberal one. No, it's an American issue because it speaks to freedom, liberty, and the principles that all of us across this political spectrum can agree are of the utmost importance. Mr. Chairman, I yield the balance of my time to Mr. Robert Kennedy Jr., if I may.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. Go ahead, please. State your name.